POI is on chat, please. Okay. All right, starting in 3, 2, 1. Simple argumentation coming from opening government. Why in both short term and long term, it is simply good to reduce the socially unacceptable behaviors. Before moving on, some piece of framing. Firstly, parents cannot abuse this. Cannot abuse this bill. Parent needs to consult to third party, like mainly doctor, in order to get prescription. Whether or not children have problem, whether or not the amount or frequency of pill is proper, etc. Just the same as a usual prescription of medical pill. Once the doctor detect as like it is likely to be abused, I think the doctor are unlikely to give this pill in the very first place, which means that abuse is unlikely to happen. But secondly, I think moral education still exists, for example, in school or parents, etc. For the reason, firstly, there is some portion of people who don't subscribe a pill in the very first, obviously, but secondary also like those, like obviously there's majority of people doesn't take this pill like forever. I think that there is some portion of people who opt out from this, uh, who quit to take this bill. I think moral education still exists, and I think that people are likely to go through with these moral education anyways. Having said that argumentation, firstly, why in short term it is simply good to reduce socially unacceptable behaviors. Firstly, it is good for that person in question. Two reasons here. Firstly, there is a portion of people who have cognitive disability that is simply like biologically difficult to obey, or that biologically difficult to like code to that the socially acceptable behavior. I think those kind of people are unjustly suffer from the societal expectation to do socially acceptable behavior for the reason, and if they cannot suit to these socially acceptable behavior, they are likely to suffer. For example, they lose friends. For example, they need to forcibly opt into the like bad human relationship, etc. I think those kind of people will be protected by taking this pill and having able to have socially acceptable behavior without like suffering from like which kind of like action they need to take in this specific situation, etc. I think it is simply good, and simply we are able to protect those kind of like people who are inherently difficult to have socially acceptable behavior. But secondly, also for the general people, I think it is also difficult to opt out by uh also for those kind of people who go for like kind of like socially unacceptable behavior for the like simple reason. For example, they are in the adolescence or something like that. I think they are difficult to opt out by themselves without taking this pill. For example, like there is less educational opportunity. Once they opt out from education, they are less it is difficult for them to coming back to the educational field, going to good university, good high school, etc. I think this is quite a big opportunity cost that these kind of children need to go through with. And also like there is a differences in the culture that they are growing up. For example, they when they are going to like young gang or something, that the bad human relationship, I think that those kind of like environment will be constrained themselves into that community, which means that it's difficult for them to actually opt out from themselves. So I think these kind of like preemption to not enter to this bad relationship or opt out from this relationship, this pill is necessary. But secondary is also good for
POI.
people around. But before moving on, yes, POI from O.
Do you support lobotomy surgery?
I don't know, because like these kind of like thing doesn't this pill doesn't have any kind of like the lobotomy surgery is kind of like different from this kind of pill in the very first place, for the reason there is no risk into the like no risk for like affecting to other portion of the brain in the very first place. The motion clarification said there is the safety will be guaranteed. So I think that there is different things in the very first place. Then moving explaining why it is good for people around. People good people for good for people around them. Firstly, I think it is simply reduce the harm by, for example, like younger crime by younger generation, etc. the harm from like socially unacceptable behavior, etc. I think there definitely for the third party for harmed by these kind of like action taken by the people who take socially unacceptable behavior. I think that those kind of harm will be significantly decreased for the reason that there's this number of people who take such kind of like action. So I think that it's simply beneficial for the people to less opportunity to encounter such situation in the very first place. But secondly, I think it is also decrease the burden for child caring for the parents. I think it is simply troublesome for the parents when once, like for example, parents prepare for the dinner or something like that, children reject to eat, or like children reject to eat or something like that, or like once they need to like ask for children to do something, the children reject to do that, something like that. I think those are kind of like daily basis stress are likely to accumulate in the parents. I think that these kind of problem will be solved for the reason children can be more cooperative to the, like for example, like child houseworks, or like maybe that they are able to like listen to the parents more. I think that those kind of burden for child caring will be decreased, and I think those kind of to harm that accrue for people around is very important things, since it's gonna be likely to happen in the daily basis. I think those accumulation of the impact are likely to huge in our huge, that basically that these impact, even though it seems to be slight, cannot be ignored in this round. So I think those kind of problem will be solved in our paradigm for the reason that these socially unacceptable behavior will be solved. Then secondly, why it is good in long term. I think children who take pill continue to be pride even though they quit to take pill. Firstly, the community that they belong to are likely to be pride. I think that same kind of people will be gathered in the same kind of in your community. For example, when you go to the good university, I think that people around you are consist of like people with some kind of like educated or have reasonable background or something like that, or something like that, or even though it's gonna be not some kind of like good university. I think that if there's people who do socially acceptable behavior cannot be compatible with the people who do inacceptable behavior. So I think those kind of social community likely to encourage you to be pride in the very first place. But secondly, the reaction from others also like encourage them to be more pride. I think that they are able to learn from the experiences that when they do some kind of a good action, they're able to get good reaction. When they do bad, but get bad reaction. I think those kind of things are able to learn from their experiences that makes them to keep being pride. So I think these kind of like long-term behavior likely to be last long-term. I think it's quite beneficial for the reason I'm very proud to propose.
思いますか？
はい、ありがとうございます。Thank you, Chair. We think this drug is likely to be psychologically very addictive, and it's going to be used in a way that changes the kid's characteristic forever. We think this is clearly beyond the scope of what parents are allowed to do, and we think it's a harm that we cannot bear. What we're going to talk about is three things. First of all, I'm going to tell you what this debate is actually about. We don't necessarily believe that this is about severe antisocial behaviors or kids with that kind of things. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why we think this is very addictive and why it harms people's psychology and self-identity into the future. Thirdly, why we think that it actually leads on to harming the classroom and the other kids' ability to enjoy education as well. First of all, what this debate is all about. So what we heard from them was that how people join gangs and they have a completely ruined academic career or whatever. We think that often, most likely, these people who join gangs from a young age come from a family that is mostly dysfunctional. Parents don't necessarily care about their children, meaning that they probably wouldn't really care about bother wasting the time going to the doctors, taking the kids to the doctors, getting these pills, and advising the kids every day, every morning, every night to take these pills anyway. So these people will not have that much of a delta. So what this debate is all about is about children who are slightly off the scope of what is seen as normal and social in that community. And this is where the case becomes a problem, because we think that these people can be taught to behave properly. Anyway, that's what we do in schools. That's what we do allow parents to do. We think most people can actually learn socially good behavior on the course of education and on the course of growing up. The problem here is that when you say that you can't do anything that is not in the socially good accepted scope, we think this is a problem, because opposition government has a burden to prove what good socially acceptable actions are. We just don't think it exists. They have to prove why it is that obedience is always good and obedience is always good. We think there is no universal accepted standards of what a good education is. For example, in Japan, obedience is seen as a good thing. In America, it's probably a different nuances are attached to it. Obedience towards social order may be important, but it's important sometimes to express who you are and what your concerns are. We think that you have to prove on government bench why this is automatically a good on children. Okay, second thing, why do we think this is very, very, very bad for the children? First of all, I think this is likely to be used by the parents again and then again and again. So what this means is that parents live in a structure nowadays of being working several jobs, working long terms, especially when you are talking about families where their parents cannot necessarily take care of the children 24/7, like the British government has been telling you is a problem in this way. These people have to work jobs. Both parents are working. They live in a nuclear family. They can't rely on like grandparents and so. And they can't. Often, the average kid goes to a public school where it is poorly funded by the state, and the school is not necessarily reliable. These parents would like to go to the doctors, take their children to doctors, get a lot of these pills, and then give it to them before they go to school. When they come back to school, and then they're going to use it again and then again and then again. So we think that check on this was about doctors. The Prime Minister mentioned about doctors will check. First of all, we just don't think doctors are very, very trustful in these cases. Doctors can check through their professions whether this pill is actually working or functioning on the child's psychology or not. They can't really comprehend the moral necessity that happens in individual household, because simply the doctor does not exist in that household. Secondly, we think that they told us that if this is going to be used again and again and again and it is abusive, the doctors would check. Well, we don't think this is actually going to happen, because specifically this obedience pills allows physical abuse from not happening, because parents don't have to hit their children, in order to make them quiet a little bit more. So we don't think this is actually going to be found out to be very effective. But lastly, we just think that doctors have an incentive to be persuaded by parents that they need more and more pills, because it makes them money. It's going to be paid by the national insurance by the parents, and it's going to make good money. Lastly, we think that factually we already know that even in Japan, in America, where prescription exists for things like anti-depression pills, these things are actually used by children, by a lot of people to the extent that that overdoses happen. We know that people can actually trick the doctors into giving them by telling them the necessity, and that does cause them to take it again and again and again, and that is problematic. If we think that this cycle of using it again and again actually leads to a psychological addiction on the children. Why is it? It's because children learn throughout their ages of 1 to 18 that in the times where they actually drink this pill, they are not scolded by parents. They feel like they are loved by parents, but they feel like they're not becoming a burden parents. While they also learn that in cases where they forgot to take this pill, you would act in a wrong way. You would probably be hated by friends. Your parents probably would actually scold on you or look down on you or start show gestures of anger or hate or whatever. This is why we think that these people are going to be very, very addicted. We think this is actually going to lead to a psychology where you just don't know who you are. You have to want to be angry, but you can't. And it's going to scar you and make you feel that you are not a person anymore. And this leads to to things like depression into the future. In worst cases, they die. I think that they actually engage. The journey of questioning yourself is in and of itself is a harm on people's identity, and that is a harm. We think this is clearly beyond what parents can do. Parents can't scar people for life. That's why we don't allow parents to like hit them a lot or like physically educate the children, because that might permanently lead to a psychological or physical damage on the children. That's the things that I am only loved when I'm hit. Therefore, they are embedded with the psychology and the characteristic of violence, and that scars their children's life forever. We think this is close to it. Lastly, we think this is harmful for the classroom. We think that in cases where children who are not necessarily from like really from bad backgrounds act badly in schools, and therefore act badly in schools or act badly at home, they probably have a problem that they can't express. For example, when a kid comes back home and is very angry or engages in violent acts, they probably have a problem at school. Like, for example, the school teacher is sexist, or the school teacher is abusive, or all these kind of things. They probably maybe they can't catch up with the school curriculum, or maybe they have a bully that is probably harming the school environment. These kind of situations are often overlooked, and unnoticed by parents when children act normally or act obediently, coming back home, and then say that there was nothing wrong in school, mom, and everything is going well. These kind of things probably harms not only this child, but the ability of parents to notice what is going on in the classroom. And classroom teaches on average like people of 40, and all these people's educational opportunity are robbed. For all these reasons, we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The important lesson from regrettable history of lobotomy surgery is external modification of the morality is unacceptable, and morality is the core of the identity, and external change is particularly bad things. That's why we think that this kind of drug is just seemingly temporary, but in the long-term usage of this drug, actually change and make the children's behavior and morality bad things. That's why we think this is unacceptable policy we are talking about. So two things in deputy leader opposition. Firstly, the opening government case about social impact, or how the utility will be maximized by this policy, and why this is unacceptable. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how this temporal solution of this politeness harm the children's growing, and this is morally unacceptable. So let's start from the social utilities. They mentioned that two layers of utility in terms of the society, in terms of the families. Firstly, in terms of society, this is obviously out of debate, because this motion is about parents' allowance. In order to minimize the crime outside the families, outside the houses, in this occasion, that this is obviously problem solution mismatch, because this motion is not about the police allow police to use the young gang to take the pill in the motion. This motion is about the parents, and more than that, practically, these kind of young gangs are often the family, the young gang's parents are often neglecting, and they do not care about their actions outside the home. In this occasion, this is highly less likely to use they use this kind of drug. That's why this is no solution at all. And secondly, in terms of family level, firstly, if the special treatment is necessary in order to change the behavior of the children, biological level, this is necessary to long-term treatment, and just temporal treatment is particularly not the perfect solution, because their biological nature will not be changed because just taking the short-term pill, because after they become the adults, in this occasion they have to combat with their own characteristic, and we think that this kind of solution for the biological features is necessitated long-term by using the counseling with psychological doctors or the teachers and parents discussions. We think this kind of long-term solution will be prevented by this situation. And thirdly, the DPM mentioned that the child raising is particularly troublesome, because the children is crying is quite a big burden. We accept that crying children is the big burden for the parents, but this is actually proven that this kind of just children is crying, so let's take the pill. We think that this is the OG's stance itself is to prove that the cultural prescription of the drug, because that is in order to just crying or just absent, just they do not go to school, just do not obey the parents. Let's prescribe. We think this kind of attitude itself is proven to you that how that this kind of casual prescription is easily happening, and children have to frequently take this kind of prescription and this kind of politeness pills. We think this is clearly disadvantageous to clearly proved to our arguments. That's why comparatively, we think this kind of casual prescription may solve the problem of crying the children at night, but this is long-term problem is particularly more significant. That's why we win this debate. So let's talk about the main issue about how this temporal solution of this politeness is harmful for the children's growing. My partner already mentioned that this kind of temporal solution of from this politeness or the disobedience is the hide the root cause of the problem, because the reason why children's absence is not sudden feature of the biological characteristic. Maybe the problem exists in the school, in the family, in the society. We think this kind of the children's disobedience is important signal of the families or of the school to change the situation. But on the other hand, on their side of the house, just prescripting the pills can be the easy solution for them. But we think that children's mental damage, for example, bullying in the school is continue to exist. But even though they do not want to go to school, but they actually, due to the pill, they have to go to the school, and they continue to be bullied. We think this kind of psychological damage is particularly harmful in the first places. That's why I say the easy solution cannot make the solution to the root cause. And we think even if it takes a long time, still we need to change. We need to consider the environment, and still we need to change the situation. That's why we say this is not easy solution, but we say this is important solution coming from outside the house. So let's talk about second additional harm to the internal egos of the children, because we think that children cannot deal with the internal violence in our paradigm, because some children are biologically violent and unfortunately biologically, for example, psychopathic in terms of their biological features. But we think that school or the education or the families exist in order to minimize and how good to deal with this kind of internal violence of the situations. We think that violence behavior is bad thing. This is not the intuition, but they have to learn from the rationality. We think this is particularly important situation in the status quo. But in their paradigm, if the violence exists internally, in this occasion, let's prescribe the pill. Just as this is the solution. We think that this kind of how to deal with the internal violence is particularly important for the childhood errors, because the childhood incident, like for example, punching with the friends is at best the not so large damage. But if you become an adult and stop taking this pill, in this occasion, their violence is huge problem in the societies, because they cannot cannot know how to deal with their internal violence, and actually they commit the violent crime. This is particularly significant issues after adult. That's why we say learning in the childhood is particularly important. And thirdly, we think that they cannot feel affection from the parents, because the parents who love the parents is actually not their true ego or true self of the children, but the pill modified self of the children. We think this kind of separation of the true ego and the modified ego exists in their paradigm. That's why children cannot feel affection. Just parents love myself only when I take the pill. We think this kind of affection is particularly harmful, and the children and parents have to continue to take the drug. We think this kind of moral modification is actually happening after taking this proposal. That's why we think this is similarly to the lobotomy surgery we oppose.
Am I audible? Okay. All right. POIs verbally, please. If you type in the chat, I probably won't be able to see it. Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'd like to first start with the long-term benefit that I think the OG was too assertive about, and they never told you why. This is good aside from the net benefit, right? I want to talk about why it helps children and them going to school by the prescription of these pills. 2 layers. A, you make it your custom when you are able to establish a routine with these pills, meaning that it is easier to go to school if you have a habit of going to school continuously, even if you're under the influence of these pills. Like habitual and routine behavior will get established slowly, and eventually you will know that, like, what time do I get to school, like what kind of behaviors do I display, and these things slowly establish itself so that it teaches and educates the children how exactly going to school is good. But I also think that when it comes to things like if you're an antisocial person, or you have like social anxiety as a kid, or you have like socially difficult conditions, having these pills actually help you get rid of these conditions and actually teaches you what kind of like socially acceptable behaviors they are, and it makes it your custom, meaning that like kids will feel easier on a long term going to school because of this routine establishing, and eventually even with these pills not existing, they'll be able to learn how to go to school. Why will there be no psychological harm, right? I think that it is pretty clear that like when it comes to the kid being an adult and like reflecting back to their childhood, they are able to come to an understanding if they're able to receive good education and have these kind of exposed to different experiences because of these pills. I also think that they will be able to establish better communication with parents if they are able to establish these socially acceptable behaviors, and if they're able to remain calm with their parents when they are able to communicate. I also think that at the end of the day, like thankfulness towards their parents and these kind of relationships that they have established when they go to school or when they display these socially acceptable behaviors will continue. This is because like you establish things like friendship, you hang out with like good people who are able to motivate each other. Therefore, you are probably going to be like thinking about like going to university or wanting to reach better education or higher education. And these will remain your goal even when these pills don't exist. I also think there will be like empathy and like sympathy that are established with teachers. If you have a teacher who is really good to you because like you also display socially acceptable behaviors and you're able to communicate with them effectively, these kind of relationship will last. I also think that like when it comes to the trust they have built, the path that you have walked, and the kind of experiences that you have been exposed to, these kind of things will help you on a long term when it comes to establishing how exactly you think about your life. And these kind of like things will not leave a psychological harm, because the moment in which you turn into an adult, when you reach your goals, you're able to reflect back to these behaviors and experiences and be able to have that thankfulness that you have been taught and educated under these pills. I also think that like knowing what's right and wrong and being exposed to like individual autonomy is going to happen under these pills. This is going to be an extension that is individual of the final effect, right? Even if it fails in the end, even if you don't necessarily get educated, even if you turn out to be like a bad person or like you want to do rebellious behaviors, at least we're able to provide these kids an opportunity to act under the socially acceptable criteria, right? What does this mean, right? What kind of choice makers are young adults and kids? You're able, like kids and young adults, they are able to reflect back to like your own experiences, such as like having a fun time or like the kind of friendship that they have established, like choosing your friends, doing what your friends think that are cool, like such as like good influence friends and bad influence friends, right? But the core thing about kids and young adults is that they cannot necessarily guarantee the most holistic views when it comes to their life and their experiences. So being able to have the autonomy to experience what better decisions look like and what being educated looks like, even if they don't end up choosing that path, having the experience in itself provided by these pills are important. And only parents are able to consider what is better for their child, right? So if you like turn out to be, if you are born in a very poor area and you're only thinking about like doing rebellious behaviors, at least these pills are able to temporarily calm you down and put you into an educational system and be able to have you experience that. And at the end of the day, like even when you're out of these pills effects, you're able to choose and reflect upon your own experiences to choose what is better for yourself and to be able to have that experience. We think that this is important, right? Because on the comparative, when kids don't necessarily like listen to their parents at all, they don't do what their parents want, they give no opportunities to these kind of educational experiences, they're unable to choose what is truly good for themselves. Second thing I want to talk about in my extension is how investment and political narrative happens. Poor families get accessibility to child education. This is the first layer. The accessibility for these pills in poor areas are better compared to comparative situations such as like having a nanny to watch your kid or sending your kids to private schools or spending time when you need to work. These are all very pricey behaviors that compare like side opposition comparative looks like in order to shape their kids into better kids, right? Parents care about their kids even in poor families. This is because of things like love, even if it was accidental. By being with the kids for a long time, you develop affection, but also like focus on education. Although you come from poor areas, it does not necessarily mean that all families they don't want like their kids doing big things, right? But I also think that like intensity of the crime, even if you do not care about their kids, having their kids arrested are huge financial burdens. For example, having to bail them out or having to deal with police and welfare checks. Most likely, opt-in of these pills are preferable in comparison to crime, even in poor families. So at least in a comparative, poor families can watch over and educate their kids with less barrier, less alcohol usage, less illegal behaviors. We provide the missing link to OG impacting and the problem that O pointed out. I think that in the end, we're able to say that poor families are able to opt into these pills because they care more about like education. They like generally don't want to spend that much money. It's more accessible for them, right? But B, problematic kids don't get taken seriously in the status quo, right? Politicians and political narratives, they do not take kids from problematic areas seriously. This is because they blame that kids are the problem, they're the problem why gangs exist. They also blame that parents are not giving good education, and why these poor areas are like this is because of them, right? What changes as a result of these pills is that you're able to show to the politicians, you're able to show to the areas that these kids are able to be good and socially acceptable behaviors too, and this garners more investment. Finally, I just think that like when it comes to parents, you'll be able to reduce stress and reduce neglect more because they're easier to educate and you can ensure better negotiation, but also having more utility over your kids in extreme situation. If your kid is bullying others, at least you'll be able to control them. I think this is net good. Because of that, we probably propose.
Okay, am I audible? Okay, thank you. So POI in chat, no, voice please. Sorry, wait a sec. Hey, so starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Since all just say that parent can notice that children's mentality, and they didn't talk about after noticing how parents react and how the problem are likely to fix. So that is why a simple extension from the closing opposition is just so how the reaction of the parents are different inside of our side of the house and their side of the house. And secondly, quickly kick out the OG's argument by saying that on the principle level, so intervention, so eliminating the choice itself is bad. So firstly, moving on to the principle. So, Taiki Tsuchiya said that, since preventing the harm to the others, the interventions are likely to be legitimized. But we say that is untrue in two ways. Firstly, because the philosophical meaning of Politeness Pill is that eliminate the entire choice of the children. Currently, the adolescent law forms guides children choices through disincentives. So, for example, if children goes to delinquency, their parents are likely to be punished because of the fail of the educations. So, there's a two connotations from this statement. Firstly, the responsible entity is different. Currently, parents take responsibility of the result of the education, and children don't take the responsibility itself. So that is why that they have to explain why the children become suddenly the responsible entity of the result of the education, because the children the condition of the children, entire quality of the children are likely to be determined by the parents' education and genes and so on, environment, right? So that is why that since so in order to prevent the children's delinquency, that suddenly the children's choices are likely to be diminished, that is categorically untrue. And secondly, the extent of the penalty is disproportionate. OG just assert the staff of like convenience store are likely to damage or other friends are punched and kicked. But on the other hand, what children lose is the entire characteristic and entire opportunity of the characteristic development, right? And that is why that is clearly determine the entire life and entire capacity to feel happinesses. And that is why we say that in terms of gravity of their life, that is so depriving eliminating entire choices is completely a disproportionate punishment for the children. So that is why, in terms of principle, their principle argument or their justification of the intervention are completely fail. So
UI,
okay.
how do you explain compulsory education? Because children do nothing, but they need to stay at
compulsory education give them choices in the future choices, right? So future choices of employment or so on. That is completely different, maximizing the choices or eliminating the choices. That example is untrue. Okay, moving on to better relationship within the family. So opening operation clearly explained that delinquency is positive feedback to the process of the children's development, and children can freely express their playing hooky when there are problems in school, and children go to night walk means families are likely to be uncomfortable. So, for example, neglect issues are existing in the family. So why does it but they didn't explain how parents' reaction are likely to change after they notice that kind of problem. So two things. Firstly, internal changes inside of family structures are likely to exclusively happen on our side of the house. And secondly, external support are uniquely available on our side of the house. And lastly, about impact. So, okay, firstly is about internal changes. So since on their side of the house, when parents using Politeness Pill, there's no counter from the children to fight back against their parents, right? So there's no conflict between the educational opinions or no conflict upon the playing piano or so on, right? And that is why the parents are likely to intervene more to the children's choices because children are no counter to them. So that is why the parents are likely to push their children of their own will, and parents are likely to neglect their children's will. Why that is on the comparative on our side of our house, since the children are likely to more freely express their opinion through the forms of delinquency, and since that is only form for the children, because parents are anyway absolutist, and so children are less likely to directly counter to the children by saying your opinion is untrue or so on, right? That is why there's delinquency is the only choices for the children to express their own will by canceling the school or so on. So that is why children this is the only way to decrease the amount of homework or decrease the expectation from the parent. So that is why the parents are more likely to accept their children's will exclusively on our side of the house and can react positively towards the children on our side of the house. And secondly, even if parents have no capacity to respond that signifier why the external support are available. Two things. Firstly, adults are likely to aware the problem through the immoral behavior. For example, community are likely to notice that children's night walk, and police and schools or other experts of the education are likely to notice the bad behavior of the children. That is why these kind of bad behavior are likely to be captured by these adults around them. So that is why these adults are likely to be to intervene to the children's bad environmental conditions. So closing government say, we can garner more investment. But in our side of the house, children can freely express their bad educational condition in such negative way, so we can garner more investment, and because it is more visible. Okay, and proper investigation and interventions are likely to be conducted exclusively on our side of the house because schools and policies have a specific function to intervene to that family problem or so on, and they have capacity and so knowledge and experiences to fix that problem at the first place. That is why these external entities are likely to intervene. And secondly, that impact. So children's personality is less repressive on our side of the house because children constantly feels express their like negative emotion to externally, and so that is less burden on for the children on our side of the house. We try to oppose.
Yep.
Good. POIs, please vocalize, not chat. I will not be looking at the chat. He, him pronounced. Three, two, one. The first thing I want to nail is about consent. Why do parents have the right to take over children's agency and they have right to remove their agency? Opening government was lazy in responding this, particularly when this was well explained by opening opposition or closing opposition. Note that we posit as a response to the opening opposition bench, consent is a mechanism through which the society delegates decision making to the individual to help them achieving a better life. However, children often struggle to make informed choices, so society assigns the decision-making power to those who can act in a better manner or a better interest. And children in particular lack the ability to fully understand the long-term consequences by opting into bad behavior, for example. Parents as a legal and societal guardians are uniquely positioned to make their choices and that prioritize their well-being. Because the children's autonomy is not yet fully developed, restricting certain freedoms of children, it can be justified insofar as this lead to better life or justify as something necessary one. Intuition pump is very simple, just as parents can consent to the medical treatment for their children, regardless of children's preferences, parents are better equipped to make health-related decisions, so they should have the authority to shape their identity. So the second response to the consent issue to opposition bench is that I think this pill can be also perceived as a self-protection method, which is uniquely provided to children to opt out from the externality. What do I mean by this? Children are very immune to the very fluctuating environmental, which is oftentimes very uncontrollable for them, such as bullying, such as lacking good teacher, right? However, the pills enable them to not to make troubles. For example, like being regarded as problematic children, or being regarded as being kicked out from the classroom, for example, or being which means that they better able to protect themselves. They can take distance from the risk of taking bad drugs, for example. So this can be justified also as a self-protection measure. Note, moving on to the second issue, I'm gonna summarize what ACA's extension is was important and why responding to opening opposition and closing opposition. We think that opening opposition creates psychological damages by getting bullied still remains, and we need to nail with root cause and problem. Closing government extension, which is talking about the comparative treatment upon children, is going to flip opening opposition solvency. The first thing we talk to is that parents and teachers treatment upon problematic disrespect to students is worse off on an up, which is prerequisite explanation for opening a government bench to prove why this pill is exclusive and have massive delta. In a status quo, parents are likely to scold at children, take distance from children by confining them under the justification of as a punishment or teaching or coaching, and they neglect from letting them go to the school because it's very even they do the physical abuse. This is because the parents are stressed out over children's treatment because they don't know the proper way of dealing with personality or appropriate way for educating them. The closing opposition asserted that problematic children are closing opposition asserted that making compliments against teachers can be a important role to fix their behavior, but this is untrue because note in particularly in these areas, like problematic children are like they were regarded just as a problematic children are screaming, and I think the negative stigma, past experience of usage of drugs lose the legitimacy for their claim, which means that schools are quite unlikely to rectify their behavior, even if teacher is somewhat problematic. The teacher whose salary is fixed do not have active incentive to devote their effort to fixing their children's behavior, even if children are a nice guy. Like easiest response to the problematic guy will be like, in order to maximize classroom utility, it's quite likely that they will ban these problematic children to join the classroom in the first place. These bills enable teachers to be proactively alert to the problem children and solve the problem of them not providing a proper education. The second mechanism we gave is that state and local government running school. On off, these actors are likely to pull out the resource upon school with a lot of bullying, which is prerequisite for any treatment. Even if the government invests money invest into black people's schools, it's meaningless if no student attend in the first place. When the right wing, then this is a moment when right-wing politician or anti-black community are going to claim that it's waste of investment in education and the budget will be removed. But however, therefore the problematic children lose their counselor, which is prerequisite for their therapy or moral education, particularly in impoverished area. This extension is particularly variable in the variable contribution in this debate. Why? Number one, this is a flipping mechanism of open competition. What closing government improved is particularly in this pro area, proper feedback and treatment upon treatment upon delinquency does not exist at all. That is why they totally lose any opportunity for social progress by the uncontrollable birth lottery. Secondly, this is variable against opening government and closing competition. Closing competition successfully pointed out that opening government's benefit is too small compared to what children are deprived of. But closing competition massively expanded the comparative delta efficacy of these pills so that we better able to justify it before moving on POI.
So if states and government parents know better than the children and children are likely to thank their parents for giving them the pill in the future, why do we not allow violent education? Isn't it because we want to prevent parents from screwing up the personality of their children into the longer future?
I think that is quite unimportant POI because it's not burden of on government bench to believe why violence is something good solvency. So final thing I want to talk is that pointing out weighing upon opening government, the second way to put closing government over opening gov. First, I think it was insufficient. Open government was quite insufficient in proving why children behave well in the wrong run, which is well pointed out by bench. Injection of pill prevent children from going to bad relationships, such as gang membership, go to better university, which was only explanation given by open gov. I think additional mechanism given by open gov is that personality get better because people around you are also polite, which is contingent on usage of pill. And they also mechanize learning from past experience, which is also symmetric. Like both mechanisms suffer from the burden pushed by opening up. The closing government linked the mechanism, while the long-term effect after stopping uses does exist. The first is the habit formation or adaptation and learning or long-term behavioral changes that a member of government mechanize. So overall, closing government massively explained the comparative likely education, which is massively depriving children opportunity. We prove the exclusivity of these pills. For that reason, we affirm.
So POI and voice, please. Okay. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Since the closing opposition is the only team to talking about the valid justification of not intervening for the children's rights, and also why the children's characteristic development processes are likely to be supported by adults, including not only parents but also the external actors like police and teachers and community. We clearly win this win this round because we show the clear solutions to the only team that shows clear solutions. Okay, first the OG and second the OO, lastly CZ. So firstly, simply kick out the OG. So OG talking about two things. Firstly is about parents, for the convenience of the parents, so this politeness pill are likely to be justified. And second, so firstly, that is untrue. So because first things to note here is that we have to compare the convenience of the parents and the effect on their children. We say the convenience for the parents is extremely smaller compared to the children's development. So opening comment talking about that. So firstly about crying at night. And second is about shoplifting, and lastly is about punching their friends. So on the comparative, we clearly talking about the children are likely to be internalize their dissatisfaction onto their immature mind, and they are likely to be constantly have the anxiety upon their parents or environment of the schools or environment of the community or so on. And they cannot express their opinion to the parents because there's no alternative for the parents to express. That is why the children are likely to have huge mental distress on our side of the house, and children's characteristic development are likely to be prevented. So that is why we say that these temporal damage with blends, because if children are punched by other friends, so they easy to recover, right? So but the characteristic itself is unrecoverable quality and determine entire capacity to feel happinesses in their life. We say that there's firstly irreversibilities of the consequences, and secondly gravity of the consequences. We clearly win this opening comment. And secondly, opening comment talking about the principles about the justifications. So firstly, they did not answer the question about why the parents are why the parents are not the entity that have responsible to the result of educations. So children are this politeness pill clearly eliminate the choices of the children and not the choices of the parents. So they have to justify why these different impose the burden to the different entity. So in the philosophical sphere, they clearly lose this round. And secondly, about proportionality, we clearly stated that there's a disproportionate between eliminate all rights and allowing temporal harm. So that is why we say that opening comment, entire argument clearly principal argument is also a fail. Okay, opening opposition. So opening opposition give you the good idea upon that parents can notice easily. So when children sign that problem exists inside of a school or families. But the crucial failure of the closing opening opposition is why the parents have capacity to solve that situations, or how the how parents and children's relationship are recovered through this emotional reactions. So we clearly answer that question by showing the consequences by saying that parents have capacity to listen to children's voices because this opportunity is precious. Since that children are less likely to say directly to other parents. So that is why we say that parents' behavior are likely to be more moderate towards the children and aligned to the children's will. So that is why we say that parents are more tolerant to the children exclusively on our side of the house. And even if parents have no capacity to resolve that consequences, that the other third parties are likely to intervene because the government already equipped that kind of system that try to save children, and since they are professional, that they have capacity and knowledge and experiences to rescue the children inside of the neglecting families or bullying in a school or so on. So that is why we say that that is more better solution than just prohibiting children to do delinquency, because so there's a huge mental this impose huge mental distress towards the children themselves, and we say that stress towards the adult is rather so much better forms of the burden rather than distress toward the children, because children is more immature than adults. Okay. Lastly, about CG. CG talking about two things. Firstly, about so showing the comparative about the solutions of the political fundraising or so on. And secondly, it's about just like exaggerate the so impact upon their children. So firstly, about impact. So I think the CG introduced the extreme context upon the gang membership, areas of gang membership or so on. We say that, so firstly, if the stress towards the children is so the reason why delinquency are so prevalent in that specific region is that the children have huge mental distress so in the daily basis. That is why if we have to force them to take that pill, so children are more likely to so pile up the mental distress in the daily basis. That is why the children are likely to be erupt after age of 18. So that is why or children at least have the mental depression or so on. So these kind of likelihood are neglected completely from their closing government. And secondly, the political intervention, they clearly missed the analysis of my so member speech, because the delinquencies are more visible way to express the political support. So that is why we say that so it is easier for the politician to attach the problem themselves. We clearly win the closing half. Thank you.